Hello, my name is Matthew Perez. I'm going to be presenting on the topic of public and private schools. In this presentation, I'll be describing how the current education system creates a need for public and private schools to coexist. We can have a better understanding of how public and private schools can fulfill each of their operational needs by analyzing the similarities and differences. This will help us decide what really matters between the two organizations. Besides the obvious similarities between public and private schools, such as covering similar curriculum, there are other similarities between the two that aren't as obvious. Let's look at both organizations' management styles. In public and private schools, the administration is most likely to use similar motivation techniques on staff. Principals at public and private schools have to ensure they have the right staff in place, and this can be verified by a principal randomly observing a teacher in their classroom during a lecture and then providing feedback at a later time. In order for students to learn, they also need to meet all of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If a school provides the basic needs the students require, the student will have less distraction and be more focused on the material. Please note, Wi-Fi is not a need, even though students may think it is. Another way they are similar is how both public and private schools need to have effective time management skills, which are scientifically calculated with a daily schedule. From K through 12, both public and private schools rely on a bell schedule to keep students and teachers on pace with curriculum. Now let's compare the differences. Besides the obvious differences between tuition requirements, classroom size, and uniform requirement, there are other differences that should be recognized. Public schools are held more accountable for their education practices due to it being a public entity. This allows public schools to be more scrutinized from legislation groups, judicial orders, the press, and parents. While private schools are still held accountable, they do not get as much attention compared to public schools. For example, when a public school changes their discipline policy, it is more likely to get recognized by the media compared to a private school. Another difference is how Wilson's public administration dichotomy has a great impact on public schools compared to private schools. For example, politicians created the No Child Left Behind Act in the mid-2000s to use test scores as a way to hold schools accountable. This changed public schools' bottom line to a less defined objective. The public schools now had to compete with one another. This is also similar to Federalist Paper number 51, President James Madison wrote in 1788, where he mentioned there needed to be checks and balances between different departments. In contrast, private schools' bottom line is revenue from tuition. Private schools' objective is to have a constant demand of students enrolled in their school. It's important to mention public schools are necessary since not all families can afford the tuition of a private school. After comparing public and private schools, we can now see the benefits to have both organizations coexist with one another. Although both organizations' primary examples are similar, the difference in the bottom line shows how public schools have a higher volume of wicked problems. The constant struggle of ensuring students show up to class and pass their tests provide a problem to public schools that's difficult to solve. And it's not a big concern in private schools because private schools have tuition that's going to get paid while public schools have to get students to come to class in order to get funded. Given multiple factors that public schools have taken into consideration, it's easier to measure the success of a private school. Private schools can calculate their success by analyzing their profits, and this allows private schools to be more innovative with their educational practice. In conclusion, it's essential to have both public and private schools exist in order to provide an appropriate balance of schooling in the educational system. Thank you for listening to my presentation and hope you have a great week. Please note I had to add 2 slides for my references.